been a few years that Miss Madinah Javed has joined us as a fabulous female recitationist, and frankly, as a recitationist. See what I did there? Cute, right? All right, we're running just a little bit behind schedule because we like to stay on brand, and we will have this conversation, which is going to be a bit of a presentation about Ramadan, what it is, its culmination in Eid, and then we will have a beautiful recitation. There'll be some opportunities to have conversation about people's own experiences regarding Ramadan and Eid, and then we can tap into the food, and that will bring us to the end of the event today. I think we have a fairly tight window because everybody wants to be in Rainy Hall today, and there's an event this evening, but we'll have a good time. So I will, without further ado, pass it on to you.
Thank you so much to the School of Divinity. It's really become part of my own Eid celebrations to be here every year. Now this is my 5th year, I think, so thank you for the kind and generous invitation. My name is Madinah, and I'm really delighted to be presenting an overview of Ramadan. I think I'll actually start with the recitation, so I have more energy to begin with. So, for those of you that haven't heard about the Quran or Quranic recitation, actually the very word Quran, it means and it implies recitation. So really the Quran is a recited book and an oral book, and it was transmitted orally. And the recitation of the Quran really permeates Muslim communities, particularly during the month of Ramadan. And we might often think of Ramadan as about being not eating food or drink, but actually it's a lot to do with reading the Quran, connecting to the Quran. And I think you might have heard of the Irish singer-songwriter Sinead O'Connor. Well, I remember listening to one of her interviews, and she was saying, listen to the Quran recitation. It goes straight to your soul. And she found it so powerful to hear. But what she loved to do is to listen to the beautiful recitation in Arabic and then hear the spoken English. And she said that really the Arabic recitation has to be listened to. So I will recite something for you. I'll put the meaning up on the screen. I think it's this next slide, yeah. So these are actually the verses in the Quran about fasting. So I'll begin reading this, and I'll maybe read something a little bit different afterwards. So when Muslims do recite the Quran or listen to the Quran, we all start with a good intention, and it's not entertainment or performance or anything like that. It's really for us to connect to God's words, to listen to God's words, and that brings us silence within to really reflect and think about it. And certainly during the month of Ramadan, when we are doing our evening prayers, that's what Muslims are doing. They're listening to, in fact, the whole Quran being recited to. So every night there'll be one chapter, but I'm just going to read a very short few verses for you. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم
شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان فمن شهد منكم الشهر فليصمه ومن كان مريضا أو على سفر فعدة من أيام أخر يريد الله بكم اليسر ولا يريد بكم العسر ولتكملوا العدة ولتكبروا الله على ما هداكم ولعلكم تشكرون. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا أنزلناه في ليلة القدر وما أدراك ما ليلة القدر ليلة القدر خير من ألف شهر تنزل الملائكة والروح فيها بإذن ربهم من كل أمر سلام هي حتى مطلع الفجر. So that was the recitation from the Quran, and the meaning was up there, but I didn't have the meaning for the second one, but that was, maybe I'll give you that at the end. So, we'll now have a quick overview of Ramadan. So, it's the journey of the sun which determines the time during the day and the time of the Muslims' 5 daily prayers and the daily routine of fasting during Ramadan. And it's the phases of the moon which allow us to know about the month and its intervals. The Muslim calendar follows the phases of the moon, more commonly known as the lunar calendar. And the month of the Ramadan fast is based on the lunar calendar. So you might know that the lunar months have a bearing on the ebb and flow of the ocean tides, and it's also believed to affect human physiology and, for example, the reproductive cycle and the way humans behave. Well, you see, Ramadan is really about changing ourselves. And now that we've come to the end of Ramadan, we really have to think and reflect, and Muslims are thinking, how are we going to continue? Are we going to go forward after Ramadan? Are we going to go backwards? Are we going to, all the positive changes that we've made, are we going to continue to implement them in the rest of our month? It's really like you think of an athlete, training. This is our training ground for the rest of the year for Muslims. So the movement of the moon around the earth gives it different phases. And as it moves, its shape changes gradually from a crescent to a full moon. And then it wanes for the remainder of its course until it appears at the end of the month, curved and pale, like an old date stalk from a palm tree. So you see, every day the moon is changing shape, and for Muslims in the same way, every day we should also be changing for the better. Each month of the lunar calendar follows a cycle of either 29 or 30 days. horizon. And the month of Ramadan begins when the crescent of the new moon is sighted. Fasting begins at dawn the next morning. It's a very exciting time. And this year for Ramadan, I think I was in London, so I was away from home in Glasgow and travelling. So I remember it was quite interesting and different to start my first couple of days of Ramadan there. And even though I was a traveller, I still tried to observe fasting, but it was very difficult. So you'll see, and later on in the talk, I will mention how there's some people that don't have to fast, and one of the exceptions is if you're a traveller or travelling. But if we go back to dawn, what is the time of dawn? Dawn is defined as a time when the earliest light is visible on the eastern horizon. So at this time, we want to make sure we've had our morning meal before that. And I remember I think it was one of the years I came to give a talk, somebody asked me, what do I eat for the morning meal suhoor? And I think I told him that I would have porridge in the morning, and he was very surprised. So for me, that was like my Scottish mix in there. So usually for suhoor, we like to eat something that's going to be nutritious and give us a lot of energy for the rest of the day. And throughout the day, we've got our 5 daily prayers. We're also trying to read the Quran, listen to the Quran. In some parts of the world, like in Bosnia, I once spent Ramadan in Bosnia, they have Quran gatherings. So in each of the mosques, you can go there and you'll hear that chapter of the Quran being recited, and families and friends and communities, everybody comes and gathers to listen to the recitation, to hear the beauty of it, but also to think about the meaning, because it brings us tranquility and awe, and it connects us to God. The Quran is our direct connection to God. And here, we don't have these sort of like Quran gatherings that I was used to in Bosnia or different parts of the world, but certainly here we had our evening prayers where the person who's memorized the whole Quran, all of these pages, many people have memorized them all, and they will recite them all from heart during those evening prayers. So that's sometimes what happens, and the fast ends itself at sunset with the sound of the evening call to prayer. Now, certainly Muslims living in non-Muslim countries, particularly those that have cloudier, rainy climates, use timetables that include precise times for the start and the end of the fast. So that's how we keep a track what time we're following. So through the hours of fasting, Muslims abstain from food and drink. No water, no food, absolutely, during that time. But it's not just about that. It's about fasting with our tongue, fasting with our eyes, and it requires us to control not only our physical appetites, but also to observe high ethics and character. So we want to avoid lying, gossiping, and all of these sort of things, so that we improve our character and become really good people. So fasting is not something new. It is found in other religions. However, the Muslim fast differs in the number of days, its manner, duration, and motive. And Ramadan is the ninth month of the Islamic year, the month of intense heat. The month was named Ramadan because it originally fell in the height of summer days with intense heat. And Arabic words are very rich and beautiful, and it's interesting to look at their meaning. If you look at the word Ramadan, the word Ramadan is derived from the Arabic word Raman, which literally means to bake a sheep in its skin. So similarly, the fasting person, if you think of living in a hot desert, for example, is undergoing those sensations of burning in his stomach from the extreme thirst caused by the intense heat of the desert. And in the same way, Muslims who fast are slowly burning away their sins. So I mentioned the Quran at the beginning and how Ramadan is not just about fasting, but it's when the Quran was revealed. And Quran recitation of this century is not different from when it was revealed to the Prophet. The scripture is recited in exactly the same way. The stability of the scriptural recitation did not cause the recital to become a fossil or a genre of oral art to be relegated to the museum. Instead, it is one of the types of sounds most frequently heard in Muslim society, regardless of the extent of one's piety or attachment to religious practice. And often when I've gone to do recitations of the Quran, I've met people, and one interesting gentleman was sitting next to me when I was about to do a recitation, and after I was wondering, I wonder what he's going to think of this, he's probably never heard this before. And then afterwards, I was really surprised because he came up to me and he said, you know, I really enjoyed listening to that. It reminded me of my time in a Muslim country when I heard the call to prayer. So I realised he had heard something similar before, because in Muslim countries, the recitations are really intrinsic to society in a way that we can't quite imagine here. So, along with, I mentioned already, the complete reading of the Quran, and I think for me this year, I didn't manage to read all of it, unfortunately, but I tried to read little bits every day and even just try to think about the meaning. But it's really impressive because during this time, there's so many Muslims who come together and create groups to try and read and memorise, and there's a real sense of community. And Ramadan is really about our hearts and connecting to God, and we do that through the recitation of the Quran, but also living the message of the Quran and looking at the Prophet's life, because he was really someone who lived the Quran and his manners and different ways that he interacted with people. So for us, the Quran is really sent as a healing and a mercy, and there's so many blessings when we listen to the Quran. So that's why it's something really special to Muslims. So let's look at the intention and motive. What is the main aim of fasting? Why are we doing this? It's about mindfulness, to be mindful and to be conscious of God. But also, if you read the meaning of the verses I recited, gratitude is mentioned in the verses about fasting, and they come hand in hand, being grateful and being thankful for everything. Fasting is really an exacting exercise of self-discipline and self-control. It's a way to elevate oneself. So to be a Muslim is to be someone who aspires to excellence and goodness. And being conscious of God, that is to feel that God is with us wherever we are, and having that mindfulness makes us alert and cautious of harmful things, which takes us away from doing good. And somebody who's really mindful and God conscious is someone who's grateful and thankful for what they have. The interesting thing, well, the secret about fasting, is that nobody really knows if you're fasting or not. I mean, only yourself would know. I mean, you might sneak away and have a drink of water. Only you would know that you've done that. So the real secret of fasting is that no one really knows if a person is fasting except for God. It's a hidden form of worship. So actions are judged according to the intention behind them. And it's, if you think about it, it's quite an achievement for a whole community of billions of people around the world to fast from food and drink. But that's just a small element of it. Who should fast? I mentioned earlier that I was travelling at the beginning of Ramadan. Well, Muslims who are sick or travelling, or women on their monthly periods, for example, they don't have to fast. But every sane, healthy adult who is not travelling is expected and should fast the month of Ramadan. But there are those situations where Muslims are exempt, because God doesn't want unnecessary hardship and burden to be placed on people. Islam is about God wanting ease for people, so in those situations, we just make up the days that we missed. Or we can feed a person in need. The time when we break our fast, certainly in my family, is a time when everybody's coming together and we're all in the kitchen together, preparing the table, making sure we've got the dates, we've got the fruit and our meal ready. But this is actually a special time of reflection to supplicate and pray, and it's said that, you know, the prayer of a fasting person is very special. So during that time when people are breaking their fast, they're really reflecting and thinking and making prayer, thinking about their day. And then we start by breaking our fast with some water and some dates, and then we have a meal eaten after sunset. So traditionally it does begin with dates, soup and water, and there is a real great blessing for those who invite and share their food with others. So often in the Muslim community, there are many gatherings where you can go to somebody's house and come together to share food together. But it's not supposed to be something extravagant. It's supposed to be quite simple and easy. So for me and my family, we always have soup to start our fast. I like something light and nutritious, because actually you think that you're going to eat so much, but you don't really end up eating that much. Just a little bit. It's amazing how just a little bit, something simple, can easily fulfill you, and I think that's something interesting. So, and I mentioned before the nighttime prayers. So Ramadan is about fasting during the day, but praying at night. So if you think about it, the day is very challenging. You're tired. You're being careful what you say, careful not to eat anything, to drink anything. You're careful how you're engaging with others, trying to be a good person. But at the same time, when we break our fast, we actually have so much more energy because we've just eaten, we've got to have some water. That's this real special time, because that's when we should be praying at night, listening to the recitation of the Quran. So that's why after we break our fast, maybe about a short time later, a lot of Muslims go to the mosque, and there's special night prayers at the mosque. And the usual cultural practice is for someone who's memorized the Quran to be reciting it, and we listen to that, as I mentioned. So the Muslim prayers are about mindfulness, reflecting to become more beautiful-hearted human beings. And when we do listen to the Quran, we become silent, we stop and reflect, being aware that it's God's words we're listening to, and it brings us peace and tranquility. Ramadan also involves a mandatory giving of alms to help the poor and needy. So it's really important for us to make sure that we take care of the community and we look out for the poor and needy and give charity. It's really important for Muslims during this month. At the end of the month of fasting, when the new moon is sighted signifying the end of the month, there is a festival called Eid. There's a special congregational prayer in the morning, and during that time we do Eid Takbir, so we'll say some different prayers, and then we will be together in community with friends, with family, with community members at the mosque, and we will have a special prayer, a congregational prayer. And then after that we have a time of celebration. So in my community we often bring different, kind of similar to this, we bring different food and dishes and share with one another. And also I think an interesting part is our Eid nap, because we're all quite tired after this month, so it's quite a not new thing to see on social media about the Eid nap. You'll see that during the day Muslims like to do that, and then continue visiting family and friends, sharing gifts and presents, and giving to charity. And it's a really happy time, and the festivities outstretch the Muslim community into the wider non-Muslim society, as we can see here today. And Muslims from varying countries and backgrounds celebrate in a variety of ways. And this diversity and unity is really a wonderful, beautiful thing. Islam is not just for one group of people. So I'm going to show you some photos from which show Muslims around the world and how Eid is celebrated. And there's a really, I was watching a video recently, a documentary about Ramadan, what colour would Ramadan be? And it showed how Ramadan was celebrated in different parts of the world. There's a saying about Islam, and Islam is compared to a clear crystal river that takes on the colour of the stones over which it flows. So it takes on that culture. So if you're in Scotland, it's going to take us Scottish perspective. If you're in Malaysia, a Malaysian perspective. And we'll really see that through these pictures. And that goes through in the foods that we eat. So we have different foods and different cultures. If you're in Bosnia, they certainly like to have